Ready? Okay. So I'm at the next step in the process here, where I showed you already how to trim the knob, right? I put that video up on Google Classroom if you happen to miss that day. But yes, I showed you how to trim the knob if you were throwing it on the wheel. You could do the same thing with a hand built. You could hand build it and then trim a knob off. But and then I trimmed the base of this. So as it is, this form looks just kind of like a lidded piece. Nice little lidded piece, right? And a lot of people throw lidded pieces somewhat like this, so you can put things in this little lidded piece. But I'm going to turn it into a teapot, and that's where the spout comes into play. So I threw this a while ago. It's actually a little stiffer than I like it, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it at an angle. Now, the big thing when you're attaching a spout, whether you're hand building it or you're throwing it, is that the top of the spout needs to be in line. The bottom of the top of the spout, so that's this, right, needs to be in line with the top of the pot. Because if you attach the spout like this, for example, you can only fill the water up halfway in your pot before it starts coming out, right? Does that make sense? So I'm going to cut this spout and I'm going to put it on this pot, but I'm going to put it at an angle. And I'm going to give myself a lot of wiggle room. So using a fettling knife, I'm going to cut down off of the lump. And again, this is a little drier than I like because it's just been sitting in a bag for a while. So we'll see if I can make this actually work with this really crappy knife. Okay. All right, so I got this at an angle. I cut it off the lump. This is what the bottom looks like. Okay, it's quite thick on the bottom, and that's okay because what you're going to do is you're going to actually just kind of hollow it out and cut by hand, kind of freehand it a little bit. And then you're probably going to cut the size down even more. But you want to start with like the bulk of the spout so that as you cut it down, you can make an intentional decision. So notice that what I did was I cut it at this kind of angle because you're going to want to attach the spout to the side of the pot at this angle, right? Okay? And so at this point, you get to really play around with what looks the best size-wise. And, you know, you don't need to have a huge spout. Sometimes you have to carve a little bit more off. Okay? But what I'm talking about, one of the most important things is that you got to make sure that the top of your spout, this part right here, the lowest point on the top of your spout is in line with pretty close to the top of the pot. Okay? And so if you did a little like line, is that a level line? That's it's higher than the top of the spout. That's fine too. It just can't be lower than the top of the spout. Because if it was like this, you could only fill up your pot to, you know, this level before water started coming out the spout. Does that make sense? So that's a really important functionality piece with the spout. So figure out where you want it to be, how high up you want it to be, and that's going to require really looking at it on the side and deciding like, is that too big? Do I like the way that looks? And then cutting it down a little bit so that it fits the form. So I'm just kind of shaving down some of this leather hard clay so that it fits the form a little bit better as I attach it. So you can just kind of do some little adjustments to it until you get to the place where you're like, okay. And now if my spout was a little bit softer, I could manipulate it a little bit more, but it's pretty firm. So I might say this is a good spout, or I might cut a little bit more. I might just take this down a little bit more. Cut a little bit of the height off of it. I don't need it to be quite as long of a spout. Okay. And you can make it kind of thin towards the bottom because that part's going to actually kind of butt up against the edge right there when you slip and score it on. It doesn't need to be a big, thick seam. Okay, so that might be a better length for the pot. It seems pretty good. Might be a little even vertical. Okay, once you find kind of the direction that the spout should be, and you've done this kind of check of the top of it to the spout, and you like the size, then you can mark it, okay? And so you would just mark around with a pencil. Now I think I'm gonna cut this a little bit more. I think it's just a little too bulky for this pot. So I'm just gonna kind of follow my line around and just take it down a little bit more. Doesn't need to be quite that intense of a spout. But you know, obviously the bigger the pot, the bigger the spout might want to be. Okay. So you're almost kind of shimming the inside of this a little bit. Okay, so that seems like a little bit more realistic size-wise. So once you kind of line it up, you make sure that it's the right size, you're ready to attach it, then you can kind of hold the spout on and draw a little line with the pencil around the outside, like so. Circle, okay? Then you have two choices. You can either make a hole open, cut it out completely, or you can drill hole circles. So if you like to use like loose leaf tea, the circles are kind of nice because they clog the loose leaf kind of gets clogged up within the circle, so it almost acts like a filter. If you normally just steep bags of tea, you can pour it a little bit better. So that's really kind of personal preference, but what you're gonna do is go on the inside, give yourself some room, and make an interior hole circle, okay? And it doesn't have to be a perfect circle. I'm kind of doing this backwards, so for the video, this is how I cut backwards. So you'd be taking a lot more time as you go around, obviously, and you'd be cutting it not backwards, but that's okay. All right, so I cut it backwards, and it's a little bit rough, but not too bad. Now I've got a nice little hole in my pot. Okay, smooth out this little edge all the way around, because you're gonna see that, so you know, add some water and smooth that out. Okay, and then it's just as simple as slipping and scoring this on around the outside, so you don't really see the hole itself, but you know, you don't want it to be super jagged, because like it's something that's going to come in contact with food, essentially, water that you're going to put in your body. So you want there to be nice smooth surfaces. So then take your slip and score around the outside and make it nice and gooey so that it connects really well, okay? Especially if your spout is as hard as mine is, because this spout has been sitting for a few days and this pot has been sitting. So they're actually at the right consistency. You don't want to put together something really wet with something really dry, because it can break a lot easier. So I'm just gonna finish scoring, slipping, and then score around the outside here, really good. Okay, make it nice and gooey all the way around. So don't be shy. You can always go in and clean up the little marks that are around the outside, but don't be shy. You want it to be nice and gooey so it'll accept the clay, okay? So I got it gooey on both sides, and I can line it up now the way it is. And then I can kind of press this and wiggle it a little bit and blend the seam in. Okay, and then you just can clean it up. And really take your time cleaning it up. If you need to reinforce, sometimes people want to put a little reinforcement coil down below. Just take wet clay and reinforce that little spot down below. Okay, but that's the concept. Okay, now, what's the last thing that it's going to need?
A handle.
Yep, so you'll pull a handle and attach it to this side, or you could use, some people have the type of handle that comes up here. It's like a bamboo handle, which we don't really have a lot of, but a handle that you can pour from this side is always really nice. And this type of lid being so long like this means that if you are pouring it, the tea, look at how the lid just kind of stays on the top of the teapot, okay? So perfect it, smooth this out down below, make sure that it's really sealed in well, add a little coil if it's a little bit soft, and that's how you do it. So whether you're doing it with a thrown spout or a hand-built spout, make sure that you're doing that, yeah, okay?